Hello readers, it's Sasha, and today I have a rant review for The Secret History. This is going to be structured the exact same way I did reviews in the past. I know I haven't done one in a couple of months, so if you're new here and haven't watched a review of mine, essentially what I do is I just break it down into the simple parts of these stories: the plot, the pacing, the setting, the characters, stuff like that. And I also touch on the representation, the trigger warnings, stuff like that as well. So this is going to have that structure. However, it's just going to get progressively angrier probably as we go on, because I hate this book. I hate it. It's quite frankly probably my least favorite book I've ever read. So we'll start with the genre. So the genre on Goodreads is fiction and mystery. Those are the top two genres. I personally classified this as a literary fiction, which was there. It just wasn't in the top two, so I didn't say it, but that's personally what I felt that it was. And it's about this boy named Richard.
What the fuck, Richard?
Who goes from California to this prep school, this like preppy college in Vermont, and he starts taking these super elite classes where they study Greek with one professor, and there are only like 5 or 6 other students in the class besides him. And he is there and he is doing his thing, and it ends with the murder of one of the other students in that very elite group. And this murder, first degree, not second or third degree, and it just kind of goes through their journey of the murder and then after the fact and how they all handle it in their own ways. And that's it. That's pretty much the synopsis. I gave this 1 out of 5 stars, which is wild because the last time I gave a book 1 star was I'll Give You the Sun, and I didn't even give that 1 star. I gave it like 1.5 out of 5 stars, I think. So you know it's bad when. Okay, so for content warnings, there are like 84 million. There is violence, there is gore, there is death, there is murder, there is self-harm, there is suicide, there is alcoholism, drug use, mention of sexual assault, homophobia, racism, incest, and I would probably just look into it if I were you, because there are probably a bunch more, but those are the ones that I could think of off the top of my head. In terms of representation within this book, I guess you could say the professor was apparently, like, he was supposed to be a gay professor, but there really wasn't any outward representation. Everyone in this story was just white and getting away with doing really stupid things. That's it. So we're gonna get into the plot of the story. So the premise was actually very interesting. The idea of this person moving all the way to the other side of the country, committing a murder with his new friends, of one of his new friends. It sounded interesting. The premise, it got my attention when I read it, when I read the summary. Execution was so poor. It was so poorly done in this. And I'm sorry to anybody whose favorite book this is. I'm not trying to come for you. I'm not trying to like hate on your favorite book or hate on a book you really loved. This is just where I fit into this equation. This book was so very long. This for the On my Kindle, it was 591 pages, and this book could have been properly summed up in about 350 to 400 pages. There was a lot of unnecessary dialogue. There was a lot of unnecessary explanations. There was a lot of unnecessary description. And then the latter half of the book could have been cut in half, probably, because of how much was repeated. Anyway, the climax of the book happened around page 200-ish, and I was happy the climax happened because I was reading it, I was interested, I was kind of invested in it now. But after the climax happened, it was just a bunch of adults, literal adult people, drinking, partying, using cocaine, more drinking, more partying, more cocaine. It was all the same.
Why?
There wasn't a plot in the second half of the book because it was just the characters progressively falling further and further from success. And they just kept doing the same things. They kept drinking, they kept using drugs, they kept partying. And yeah, that was, it made sense given what happened, but it was just the only thing they did. It was the only thing that any of these characters had going for them. It got repetitive, it got boring, and it got, quite frankly, it got annoying because it's just like, yeah, I know they drink. I know they overdrink. I know they overuse drugs. I know they're out here partying. What else do they have? What else do these people have to give me? And unfortunately, it was nothing. A lot of the plot in the story, both part 1 and part 2, because the book is split into books 1 and book 2, a lot of the plot was told to us. And that's fine. That's fine. It works sometimes. But as a reader, I think I would have been a lot more invested had the plot been actually experienced, where I could actually read what was going on while it was happening, as opposed to hearing about it secondhand about a month or 2 later. The first big reveal that happened was definitely wild. Don't get me wrong, it was wild. But the fact that it happened a month or 2 prior to us learning about it, and then we just learned about it through somebody else, it made it feel disconnected to me. I would have liked to live through those experiences with them. It would have been a completely different reading experience, but it wasn't, because I literally had to rely on one of the other characters to tell me everything secondhand. And it was just like, if I had been there, if I had been living through it, if I had been reading while it was happening during the situation, it could have been so much more fun and so much more interesting. And I feel like as a reader, I would have been more invested. So that is one part. I think that's just something I'm gonna have to not vibe with Donna Tartt. I feel like that's the case in a couple other of her books as well, from what I've heard, is that the plot is told as opposed to the plot is experienced. And I think that's probably one of the biggest flaws that I found within that part of the story. The pacing was entirely too slow. It took me like pretty much 2.5 weeks to read this, where I was averaging like 4 or 5 books in 2.5 weeks, maybe even more. But it genuinely took me so long because it was so bogged down with unnecessary description, unnecessary dialogue, everything I already said before. And it was just so very slow. And it got to the point where I struggled to read it while I was reading it, but I struggled to want to pick it up when I wasn't reading it, because I was just like, am I gonna have to deal with more of the Greek stuff? Especially in the first half of the book, there was a lot of Greek stuff. Am I gonna have to deal with more of the drinking and the partying? And I didn't want to. Like, I completely understand college is about doing like drinking and partying and, you know, maybe experimenting with drugs, although I don't recommend that, but like, I understand it happens, but it just, oh, it was so much. It was so much. It was so slow. Even when the interesting stuff was happening, even when the murders were happening or being told to us, it was still so slow. I was just like, pick up the pace, sir. Like, I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I have the brain of a dog. My brain just goes and goes and goes. And if you're not intriguing me, I'm not going to stay focused. And this just didn't intrigue me after a while. Let's talk about the characters. So these were literally the most awful people I have ever read about. And that was the point. I understand that that was the point. I completely get that. I don't care that that was the point. I still hated all of them. There were definitely best of the worst characters. There were definitely characters where I felt a little bit sympathetic toward. However, I couldn't feel sympathetic toward any of them at the end of the story at all. I read a lot of reviews where people were like, you have no choice but to feel sympathy. And it's just like, no, not for me. I had every choice. And I was just like, they all suck. Fuck all of these characters. They're literally the worst. I hated them. I hated all of them. So there were 6 main characters, and it felt so difficult to tell these 6 main characters apart because they all sounded the same. They all had the same voice because they were all such bad people, and they were all so similar because they were all studying the same thing in this Greek class. They all did the same things together. They all came from wealthy families other than our narrator, which was Richard. They were all so similar. It was so frustrating because I couldn't tell who I was reading about when I was reading about them, because it was just like, didn't this person just do this? Oh, but no, this person's now doing it. And just stop. Like, they were all just such bad people with no redeeming qualities that they kind of all just blended in together, and I hated it. I hated them so much. So I'm gonna go through each of the 6 main characters, and I'm just gonna summarize their flaws, if you will. So we'll do that. Richard is our main character, our narrator, the person whose side of the story we hear. He pretends to be rich. At first, you probably don't hate him. I know I didn't hate him. At first, I was just kind of like, okay, Richard's just gotten involved in some weird shit, you know? Like, sometimes that happens. But as the story progresses, you start to realize, okay, maybe Richard is just as bad, if not worse, than the rest of the people because he's complacent in everything that's going on. And he's just there and he's not speaking up. Plus, his epilogue was really... Bunny. Bunny is the one who gets killed. This is not something that is spoilery because it's literally like the first sentence of the book. And honestly, bye bitch, we ain't mad about it because he was a little piece of shit. I hated him. He was awful. He flung racist slurs and homophobic slurs around like it was no tomorrow. He pretended that he had a lot of money and used the people around him for money. He was full of blackmail. Like, honestly, like, fuck Bunny. His death was probably like the highlight of the story because he sucked. Henry was a super quiet, really genius dude. I believe he was described as being like a big guy. I don't know though. He lacked a lot of emotions. At first, I didn't think really much of him, but as the story progressed, he became just slowly more scary because of how emotionless he is, and that's just never a fun sign. He's very manipulative, he's very negative, and he wasn't great.
Next time you fucking put a hand on me, I'ma fucking rip your face off, bitch. What did he do to him? Cause he fucking pushed me next time.
Francis is probably the best of the worst. He wasn't fantastic by any sense of the word, but he had a conscience, at least partly, and he was fun. Francis was gay, I believe. They do have some, like, gay characters, I guess, but not really. But it's not, like, a big part of the story. It's just, like, there. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Anyway, Francis was fine. He had a cottage. He used entirely too many drugs and never thought that he had a problem. You know, it was the same old, but he was a lot better than the rest of them. I will say that much. And then finally, we have the twins, Charles and Camilla, who at first I actually really liked. I thought they were both better characters than the rest of them. I thought they had conscience, they seemed nice, they were fun, and then things start getting very, very weird, and I started hating them. And I think by the end of it, because Bunny, you know, is already fucking dead, so I had to pick least favorite characters of the rest of the living, I think I have to go with Charles and Camilla because they were literally so gross. If you have to gag while reading a story, like out loud gag, put the book down. Like, don't continue because it's not worth it. It's not worth your time, okay? And that's all I'm gonna say about that. Let's move on to authenticity. So is it the same as the summary kind of describes it as being? And yeah, I guess it was in a way. There's one little like description from the summary and I'm just going to read it and then I'm going to break it down for you guys. So this is the summary. Under the influence of their charismatic classics professor, a group of clever, eccentric misfits at an elite New England college discover a way of thinking and living that is a world away from the humdrum existence of their contemporaries. So if you're literally breaking this book down into the lamest layman's terms you could possibly do, this would be exactly what you'd say. You'd be like, oh yeah, they have a classics professor, they're so eccentric and so clever and they're just living miles away from this New England college. No. Okay, no. So we'll start with under the influence of their charismatic classics professor. So this man, Professor Julian, was not charismatic. He was hardly ever in the story really, and when he was going on and on and on and on about Greek or having these really, really tiny, small, minuscule conversations with the students, and that was it. Like, there was really hardly any Professor Julian, so charismatic is not the first word that comes to mind when I think of Julian. Next, let's talk about how it says a group of clever, eccentric misfits. Let's discuss how, yeah, okay, they were eccentric. I'll give them that. They were definitely out there in every possible way you could imagine. But we're never shown really how smart they are. We're just told how smart they are. Like, the entire time, we keep hearing about all these different things that they've been able to do, how smart they are. Especially Henry. Like, we're told how smart he is. But we never really get to see how smart he is. Other than his, like, planning and scheming with the rest of them for murder. So it's just like, we aren't shown how they're smart. And it's just, I think it's just one of those things where Donna Tartt doesn't show people, she tells you what happened. Instead of showing you the experience, showing you how somebody is something, she just tells you and expects you to pick up on it from there. And that's just not the type of reading I enjoy doing. Let's go to discover a way of thinking and living that is a world away from the humdrum existence of their contemporaries. Okay, all that means is that they go to fancy restaurants and hang out in fancy mansions. And sometimes once took a vacation to Rome. That's it. They literally did like nothing out of the ordinary for someone to do. Like they went to fancy restaurants, which rich people do. They went on vacation, which rich people do. And they stayed at a cottage, which some people have. Like it wasn't a world away. It wasn't a new way of thinking. So yes, certain parts of the back of the book are definitely reminiscent of what happens, but take what you read from the blurb, from these summaries, and go into it knowing that that's a very lame way of putting it. Next, we'll go to the world, which is the smallest section I have. It was just set at a New England college. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. It was a college setting. That's it. Like, there was nothing special about it. It doesn't stick out to me, but it wasn't a negative setting because I like college settings. So it was that. We'll talk about the writing style. So the writing style was actually quite beautiful. It was definitely something that I can understand why you would really like Donna Tartt's writing. Her writing, she has a way of painting these pictures that really make sense, that really make a story come to life. And I did like it. I did like some of her writing. However, it was so descriptive. And I think that's where I don't gel with her writing style, because I don't like a lot of descriptive stories, and this is what that is. And so I think that's where I couldn't gel with the story. And it was also, like I said, she tells and doesn't show. So I think that's another thing. So the way that she writes just doesn't gel with me, but I can totally see why it would gel with someone else. But like, didn't work. Did it end up going where I wanted it to go? No. Oh my god, the ending was trash. Trash. Spoilers are coming. So if you have not read The Secret History, you do not know the ending, and you don't want to know the ending, please just skip ahead. I will have a spoiler thing down at the bottom of the page until I'm done. So yes. Anyways, the ending was so fucking stupid. Literally, there were no consequences for actions that were done. Everybody in this book, besides Henry, because he shot himself, got away with murder. And it's just like, I don't fucking understand why that was the case. Like, I can appreciate a mystery or a thriller or a type of book where the killer gets away with it when it's done in a way that makes sense. But the way that this story was set up, it made me think that Richard was like writing about his experience from prison or something like that. I don't know why, but to me, that's just how the story was set up. And from the get-go, I was ready for him to be telling his story from prison, and we'd figure that out, you know, down the line when he got arrested or whatever. But that just wasn't the case. And I was just like, sir, stop. I hated it. I hated the way that the ending played out. No one got any amount of consequences. And it's just like, what the fuck? Like, why? Why would you write a book? And I get why you would write the book. I get it, because there are people who are living a very similar situation where they have done heinous crimes and have gotten away with them. But I don't want to spend 2.5 weeks reading about this awful crime that these 4 or 5 adults committed together for them to have absolutely no consequences. Like, I was invested in them getting in trouble, them getting caught. Maybe that's because they were unlikable characters, I don't know, but the fact that nothing happened other than Henry shooting himself was fucked up, and I hated it. So, rant over, it did not go where I wanted it to go. The end. Lastly, are there any positive or negative thoughts outside of these categories? Honestly, this pretty much sums up how I felt about this. I was planning on getting a little more angry about it, but I don't have the energy to be like angry, so whatever. But I completely understand why people love this book. I'm not gonna sit here and say that I don't understand, because I do. It's interesting, it makes you think, it questions what you believe to be right and wrong, it questions your morals, it questions everything. It takes you on a journey of discovering maybe even parts of yourself that you didn't know you had. But with the fucking bottom of my heart, I hated it. I hated it so much, and I just wanted it to end. I wanted to DNF it. I wanted it so much. If I wasn't reading this for a book club, I would absolutely have DNF'd this book because it was absolute trash. But with that being said, please know that, like, if you liked it, I'm really glad, because you obviously got something out of it that I couldn't get out of it. So that is all I have to say. Thank you for tuning in to this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more content. I do post twice a week. And until next time, bye readers!